Cheryl and Esther, she's already here. What we're going to start off with tonight is something because we're trying to use these next few weeks to show you things we do with the young people. And we try to make Bible learning as fun as possible too when they're at that age. And one of the things they absolutely love doing is Bible trivia. And then we keep content, keep the points and everything. But we're going to do it with the adults too. So we're going to play that right now. Mr. Lance is going to get us started. And we're going to play some Bible trivia and see how much Bible trivia all of us do. So just kind of shout out the answer, what you think about it, and then we'll just see how we do.
It's time for Bible trivia. This time we'll be asking general Bible trivia questions. The first question, for 100 points. What is the first book in the Bible? Is it A, Genesis, B, Judges, C, Exodus, or D, Leviticus?
I don't hear answer.
The first book in the Bible is Genesis. Next, for 300 points. How many books are in the Bible? Is it A, 72, B, 60, C, 66, or D, 52? That's right, there are 66 books in the Bible. Next question. This one is for 400 points. How many books are in the New Testament of the Bible? Is it A, 32, B, 30, C, 25, or D, 27? There are 27 books in the New Testament of the Bible. The next question, also for 400 points. How many books are in the Old Testament? Is it A, 42, B, 39, C, 44, or D, 37? There are 39 books in the Old Testament of the Bible. The next question for 1,000 points. What is the longest book in the Bible? Is it A, Psalms, B, Proverbs, C, Numbers, or D, Song of Solomon? That's right, the longest book in the Bible is the book of Psalms. The next question for 1,000,000 points. What is the shortest book in the Bible? Is it A, Job, B, 3 John, C, Luke, or D, Amos? The shortest book in the Bible is 3 John. The next question for 1,000,000,000 points. Which gospel is written by a doctor? Is it A, Matthew, B, Luke, C, John, or D, Mark? The book of Luke was written by a doctor. The next question for just 4 points. What does Genesis mean? A, origin, B, creation, C, 7 days, or D, in the beginning? The word Genesis means origin. Next question for infinity points. Who is the first woman mentioned in the Bible? Is it A, Sarah, B, Ruth, C, Esther, or D, Eve? The first woman mentioned in the Bible is Eve. Now for our last question, worth a bunch of points. Which of these is not a book in the New Testament? Is it A, 1 Corinthians, B, 3 John, C, 2 Thessalonians, or D, 3 Peter? Third Peter is not a book in the New Testament. Thanks for playing Bible Trivia. We hope you'll play again soon.
I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Down in my heart. Down in my heart. I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Down in my heart to say, and I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart, down in my heart, and I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. I've got the peace that passes understanding down in my heart. Down in my heart. Down in my heart. I've got the peace that passes understanding down in my heart. Down in my heart to say, and so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. Down in my heart. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart.
That was a good try. Justin, you don't go away. You're still got to sing some more. But I just didn't really hear a lot of joy in that. I heard, an attempt. But let's really try to have some joy in our voice. And I'm actually not talking to the kids as much, although I am. But some of you in the audience that are toward the back, I certainly think that you can be louder. Some of you have yelled at me louder, I know, about different things. So let's try it one more time. And I won't say everybody be as, have their voice carry as much as Justin, but let's all be a little bit louder.
I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Down in my heart. Down in my heart. I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Down in my heart to say, and so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. Down in my heart. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. I've got the peace that passes understanding down in my heart. Down in my heart. said to Noah, there's going to be a flood. Lord said to Noah, there's going to be a flood. Get those children out of the children of the Lord. Well, Noah, he built it. An ark. He built it, an ark. He made it out of sulfur, children of the Lord. The animals they came by twos and elephants and kangaroos, children of the Lord. It rained and roared for 40 nights and days. It rained and roared for 40 nights and days. Really drove those animals crazy, children of the Lord. The sun came out and dried up the landy. Sun came out and dried up the landy. Everything was fine and dandy, children of the Lord. Well, this is the end of our story. This is the end of our story. Rise and shine and give out glory, children of the Lord. All right, you can be seated. Actually, no, you can't, because we've got to do. Is there anybody here that knows these real well? Chandra, come on up and help us. Brandon, you know it? Oh, Chandra's going to do it. All right, let's get on up here, Chandra. Okay, Brandon, would you like to help us as well? Okay, so we've got two. I'm more of a singer than a motions person, so I'll try to sing. What's that now?
Okay, I'll do that.
Here we go. We're getting this on the live stream. This should be good, right? All right, Ron. All right. I may never march in the infantry, ride in the cavalry, shoot the artillery. I may never fire the enemy. I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir. I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir. I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir. I may never march in the infantry, ride in the cavalry, shoot the artillery. I may never fly over the enemy, but I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir. I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir. I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir. I may never march in the infantry, ride in the cavalry, shoot the artillery. I may never fly over the enemy, but I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir. Now, are there any hand signals for this one?
Now, we're going to divide up the side. But why don't we use kids versus the adults?
Okay, let me think how we do that. Let's just start singing and we'll figure something out. Once there were 3 wandering Jews. Once there were 3 wandering Jews. Wandering Jews. Once there were 3 wandering Jews. The first one's name was Abraham. First one's name was First one's name was Abraham. The second one's name was Isaac. The second one's name was Isaac. The second one's name was Isaac. The third one's name was Jacob. The third one's name was Jacob. The third one's name was Jacob. Wise man built his house. Oh, wait, there's hand signals. How strong is Brandon? Okay, we get Carter and Brandon. All right. So I don't remember the hand signals. So we got the killing businesses. Carter, right? And this is Brandon. All right. So here we go. Wise man built his house upon the rock. Wise man built his house upon the rock. Wise man built his house upon the rock, and the rains came tumbling down. Oh, the rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down and the floods came up, and the rocks of his house stood firm. Foolish man built his house upon the sand. Foolish man built his house upon the sand. Foolish man built his house upon the sand, and the rains came tumbling down. Oh, the rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down and the floods came up. The rains came down and the floods came up, and the rocks of his house stood fast. So build your house on the Lord Jesus Christ. Build your house on the Lord Jesus Christ. Build your house on the Lord Jesus Christ, and the blessings will come down. Oh, blessings come down as the prayers go up. Blessings come down as the prayers go up. Blessings come down as the prayers go up. So build your house on the Lord Jesus Christ. All right, we can get one more. Let's see what else we got. Okay, we'll do booster, 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 be a booster. Don't be cast like a rooster. Booster, booster, be a booster. And booster my voice. Booster!
Can you help with the hippos?
I mean, we can do this one. How about this one? We know this little light, right? This little Christian light of mine, let it shine. This little Christian light of mine, let it shine. This little Christian light of mine, let it shine all the time, let it shine. Don't let Satan get out. I will let it shine. Don't let Satan get out. I will let it shine. Don't let Satan get out. I will let it shine all the time, let it shine. All around the neighborhood, all around the neighborhood, let it shine. All around the neighborhood, I will let it shine. All around the neighborhood, I will let it shine all the time, let it shine. All right, is there another one?
Well, I got one more class.
Okay.
Well, the light song, I like doing, don't hide your light, because as we're learning, Esther is showing that light. As we keep going through, she's going to be showing that light. But if you could believe God is so good,
Okay, I can do that.
number one, because somebody may be watching that moved away recently, would love to sing that song. And I'll tear up too much to think about that. But again, we talked about the fact that in Esther, God's name is not written. There's no miracles, no lightning, no plagues. But God is very, very busy behind the scenes. So I thought, oh, well. Let's get the hand voices. I mean, they don't know. I have to cut this stuff out the front of them, and they just go along with it. So we'll do God is so good.
And thanks for all of our choreographer helpers, children and Chandra. God is so good. God is so good. God is so good.
in a second, but for some people that couldn't be here last week, I'm going to be asking the kids some questions so they can help bring up their friends that may have been on vacation or sick. What book of the Bible are we studying for VBS? Who can raise their hand and tell me? Esther, that's right. And let's see, what did we learn last week too? Was she a queen at the beginning?
I don't know.
That's good. Was she a queen at the beginning? Walter.
Yes. No.
That's it. No is the answer. That is right. And we're in the land of Persia, and Esther and her uncle, some say cousin, Mordecai, this is true or false? Let's see. They were Persian as well. And I'm going to go over here to attack one of our former students. You see how they love us. You see. The love just flows. Were Esther and Mordecai Persian?
Nope, they were Jew.
That's right. They were Jewish. We talked about how that they had the Babylonian captivity, and Daniel and a bunch of them went back, but Esther and Mordecai stayed. And another true or false, did the king have a beauty pageant, basically, to pick his next wife? Carter.
Yes.
Yes, they did. Oh, is that me? No, it's usually me. All right. So tonight we're going to see what happens next, because Esther is in the palace. She's the queen. But one important thing I want y'all to remember is this was a very, very, very different time. And the king in Persia, he was the greatest ruler, biggest empire the world had ever seen. And even though Esther is his queen, he picked. There's laws in Persia that nobody can approach or talk to the king without his prior approval or permission, or you face something worse than no dessert, or no getting to go to a water park. You could be killed. You could be put to death. And not only do you have to have his permission, even if he's given you permission, he may decide he doesn't want to see you. He has a thing called a royal scepter, and he has to have his scepter out towards you before you are even allowed. And again, if you go to him unannounced, you face the risk of death. So that's the setup we're in right now. And we're going to kick off with our narrator getting us started.
After Esther became queen, she followed Mordecai's instructions and kept it a secret that she was a Jew. Each day, Mordecai would sit at the king's gate. One day, he overheard two of the guards talking.
Every day we stand here, guard these gates. And for what? The boss never notices how much we do. He's always so busy with his parties. He seems to be forgetting those of us who work for him and make life so easy. Yeah, I know what you mean. After all, we're pretty important people. I mean, if it weren't for us, there might not even be a king. We're the ones who keep him safe. He's always in there partying. Sometimes I think we might be better off with a mod box. You know what I mean? Yeah, I get the picture. Hey, Big Tom. Yes, sir? What do you say we sort of show him a thing or two? Like what? Well, I mean, supposing there was a little accident. Maybe somebody gets into the throne room, late at night when no one's around and sort of roughs old Xerxes up. Maybe even, Yeah, go on. Yeah.
Esther.
Father, what are you doing?
No time to talk. Listen, I've got to tell you something. I just heard that you've got to do something about it, and you need to do it quickly. I just heard two guards talking about a plan to kill the king. You've got to do something.
So Esther told the king, and the two guards were hung on the tree. Esther told the king of Mordecai's help, and the whole thing was written in the king's record books while the king watched. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he was very sad and upset. It was the custom when something awful like this was happening, the people put on clothes called sackcloth and then put ashes on themselves and spent a lot of time crying out for help.
We have a slight technical difficulty, so I'll just play the narrator. I don't have to deal. Many of y'all can remember back in Samuel about Agag and Saul. Saul did not kill Agag, and he was supposed to. And a man named Haman is descended from King Agag, and he is called an Anadite. And he ended up being the prime minister, an important person for King Xerxes. He had a lot of power, and Xerxes made a command that everyone was to bow in the presence of Mordecai.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you all for bowing, peasants that you all are. Thank you, sir. You do not realize that you are in the presence, especially you, young man, you do not realize you're in the presence of second in command. You should be grateful that I'm even here. I come to this gate every day. Every day I come to this gate, and every day that Jew Mordecai stares at me. Unlike the rest of you, you bow like you're supposed to second in command behind Xerxes himself. But yet this Jew refuses. And you know, I thought about this for a while. Every day I have to see that face that he stares at me with. And I decided, you know, maybe I can throw him in prison. Maybe that'd be good enough. But no, he deserves more than prison because it's an embarrassment. Just like some of you in this audience, it's an embarrassment for him not to bow to me. And people see that, and that causes problems. So instead of sending him to prison, I think I've decided I'm going to have him killed. But then I thought about it. But that's just one Jew. If I kill him, someone else will fill his spot and also be disrespectful to me. So I think I've decided not just kill one, but I can kill thousands of Jews and wipe them all out because you don't belong here anyway. I think I'm going to have to talk with him. My king.
Haman, it is very good to see you. How are things going in the kingdom?
Oh, king, it's terrible. It's horrible out there.
Really?
Yes, sire. There are people out there. I just saw some today that they're breaking all the laws. They're breaking all the rules. And sire, it bothers me.
This sounds very serious.
It's more serious than you think. Because there's so many of them out there scattered throughout our kingdom, I'm afraid, sire, for your sake and for mine and for everyone else's, that they could get together. Maybe form their own army. They could start their own revolution. And sire, you don't understand. If they start their own revolution, our security's at threat. Our whole kingdom can cave from the inside. Something has to be done about that.
Well, this is serious. What do you suggest we do?
King, I know this is asking a lot, but I think for the safety of you and the safety of us and everything that we represent, I think they have to be killed. I think you have to write a decree that kills them all. And sire, I don't mean just the adults. I mean the old people, the regular people, the women, and even them little kids. They all got to go because they're all going to raise up and start an army against us, Your Highness.
So you feel that strongly about these people?
Yes, I'm always looking out for you. You made me number 2 for a reason,
and I'm looking out for you, so this is how serious I am. I will take 10,000 talents of my own silver, and I will give it to you to go into the treasury, and that will help fund the army and fund the people to take care of everybody, to take care of those Jews.
You know, Haman, you can have the silver and you can have the people you need to carry the sack.
Thank you.
Whatever you need. Call in the scribes.
Scribes?
Royal scribe, I have given Haman my ring. Listen as he tells you what to do.
Yes, sir. To all the governors and leaders in the kingdom. Write that down. No, it's not yet. It's yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Seems to be an issue with your age. To all the scribes and all the governors, I said that twice, write it twice. Have all the Jewish people killed. Young, old, women, children, everyone wiped out. On the 13th day of the 12th month, so let it be done. Make sure this gets posted on every wall. This gets posted throughout the entire kingdom, every public place. And let every Jew know that we're coming for you. And here's the great thing. Make sure you write this down too. Everyone that kills a Jew gets to keep all their stuff. So that's from the rich ones to the poor ones. We take all their value. Make sure that gets spread everywhere. Here's seal it. Thank you. Take that out.
Royal scribes, follow Haman's instructions exactly. So let it be written. So let it be done. And now, Haman,
Yes, sir.
would you like a drink?
Of course I would, sir. Thank you, Your Majesty. What should we drink to?
You know, I don't know.
Let's drink to the death of the Jews.
Hey.
That had been done, he was very sad and upset. It was the custom when something awful like this was happening that people put on clothes called sackcloth and then put ashes on themselves and spent a lot of time crying out for help from God. But when you were dressed like this, you wouldn't come past the king's gate. So throughout the countryside, Jews everywhere were very sad, very upset, and very discouraged. Many of them were so upset they wouldn't eat, and many more wore these sad clothes and prayed to God for help. Esther did not know about the letter that Haman had written, but one day someone told her that Mordecai was upset, and of course she wanted to know why. She sent some servants with some nice clothes for Mordecai to wear, but he wouldn't put them on. He asked one of the king's servants, a man named Hathach, to go find out what was upsetting Mordecai.
Could you please go talk to Mordecai and find out why he's upset?
Mordecai, Queen Esther wants to know why you're so upset.
Tell her that Haman is giving 10,000 talents of silver into the king's treasury, along with a decree that all the Jewish people will be killed, and she needs to know about it.
What's that?
That Haman has made an arrangement to kill God's people, our people, her people. Here. This is the royal decree.
Queen Esther, Mordecai asked the king for help in this matter.
What? What? Mordecai knows that nobody, from a servant or a slave to princes and even queens, can go into the king's inner court. It just means certain death. Unless he reaches out his scepter and heals you, if I go and speak to the king, I will die. Mordecai hasn't come to see me in over a month. Don't tell Mordecai that if I go in there, I'm going to die.
So Hathach told Mordecai all that Esther had told him, and Mordecai sent a message back to Esther.
Brave Esther. Brave Esther. Do you think that you will escape death just because you live in the king's house? If you keep quiet now, then deliverance for our people will come from somewhere else. But you and your father's house will be destroyed. And who knows? You may have been allowed to be queen for such a time as this.
Esther thought very deeply about Mordecai's words. She felt very scared, but knew this was very important to the safety of God's people. She had great faith that no matter what happened, she had to do what was right.
You have to tell Mordecai to call all the Jews in the city together. Don't eat or drink anything for 3 days. My maids and I will do the same. And then I will go to the king, even if it means I die.
So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions.
And tune in next week, the same channel, same time. And we'll see what happens. Can we have a round of applause for our cast here tonight? We had a little bit of illness and some other things decimate a little bit of it. So Stanley, Hudson, and Austin just literally did that on the fly. So thank them very, very much. And now we're going to go to our classes. And first we'll let the nursery go. Anybody in the nursery? All right. And then just following behind them are 2 to 3 year olds. That's not you, Randy Stevens. You're not in the 2 to 3 year old group. All right. And then behind them, we'll have our 4 and 5 year olds. All right, and then our K through 2 people, if you go with Miss Vicki. And then follow that up, just you, 3 through 5. Y'all come on too. And then Mordecai will be here for the adult lesson very shortly, once he gets the ashes washed out of his hair.
Trying to get myself together here. All right, let's go ahead and open to the book of Esther. Place into the second chapter, the third chapter, and through the fourth chapter of Esther. So as we go through this, I'm going to remind you again, for those that weren't here last week and those who have not been in my narrative classes, when I study and when I teach a narrative, a Bible narrative, a Bible story, there are some questions that I ask myself as I go through it, and questions that I am asking you as we go through it to think about. And I'll ask these questions after we kind of discuss the story and how it goes. And then I'll ask these questions along with some others to kind of get us into the text, to see what we can learn from the text. And just to remind you, for those that have not heard these questions before, the first one is, did I enjoy this story? Why or why not? And again, it may be that you're reading a story in the Bible, there's some things in there you don't like. There are some things in this story, tonight's events, that I really don't like. All right, so we'll talk about that. Next question is, how do the events of this story, of this chapter, of this reading, remind me of life today? These are real people in real situations in times past. Yes, their situation is different, but there are similarities in the things that they're doing and the things that we're doing. So how does this remind me? Even though we're separated by thousands of years, how can we learn? Well, what are some similar things? Third question, if I were in the story, how would I behave? How would I react if I were character whatever in the story? All right, that helps you kind of understand where they're coming from and who they are. Number 4, this is where it starts really meeting the road here, where the rubber starts meeting the road as far as application. What are some morals or lessons I can glean from this story? What are some things I need to remember and apply to my life? 5th question, how is this story disconcerting to me? How does it bother me? Sometimes it bothers you because it hits too close to home. And so how does this story bother me? And then the one that I won't ask publicly, but I want you to ask yourself and answer for yourself, how will I change because of the story? See, as we're going through the Bible, these aren't just stories, these aren't just fairy tales, these are real events, and they're God's word, and God gives them to us for a reason, and part of that reason is to help us to become more like Him. So as I'm reading this, how am I going to change? When I see what these characters do, when I see how they're living, when I see how they respond, when I see what's going on, how am I going to change? So those are the basic questions. So let's go over chapter 3. Instead of reading the whole chapter, we're going to just kind of give an overview here. So Haman has been promoted to second in command, more or less. You've seen the skit, but I'll go over it anyway. And so part of that was that when he walked through, he was supposed to get the respect that royalty would get, that people were supposed to bow. He would walk through, and there was one man in particular that refused to bow, and his name was Mordecai. And so that kind of upsets Haman, so he says, I've got to do something about it. And so he decides, they cast lots to pick a day, and on that certain day, the 13th day of the 12th month, that's when he decides that he's going to go to the king and tell the king, that's the day we want to destroy the Jews. We're going to give it that day, and everybody can rise up and kill the Jews. Spread around the kingdom, let everybody know this is what's going to happen. All right, that kind of sets the stage for chapter 3. So they give that, and they were only given, let's see, verse 12 says the king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month. So there were only 11 days the Jews were warned about this. So this is a matter of urgency, because this is going to happen on the 12th day. Did I miss that? Almost a year, that's right. So it's the 12th month, 13th day, so it's almost a year, that's right. I got my numbers backwards. Thank you for catching me on that one. As I was reading, it hit me, and wait, so thank you, almost a year. The 13th day of the first month, so almost a year so to the 12th month. So they have a year here that this is going to happen, but it's still going out. Obviously, letters go out, messages spread, this is going to happen. what are the Jews going to do about it? And they're not allowed to take up arms, at least at this point. And so what's going to happen? So let's stop there. And again, thank you for catching my misreading there. Mordecai is a Benjamite, descended from a man named Kish, which, does anybody know who else Kish is an ancestor of, or specifically the father of? Saul. King Saul. So what does that mean if Mordecai is a descendant of Kish, he's related to Saul, he is of a royal line in a sense, even though that family had been taken away from the throne. He's connected to an early king. It was during Saul's reign that Saul was supposed to kill the Amalekites, including Agag. And you remember, he doesn't kill Agag. Haman is described as an Agagite, however you want to say that. He's a descendant of Agag. So this is a long-standing family feud here, obviously, though they may not know it. What we have here is we have these people that Saul was supposed to destroy. He didn't completely destroy them. He left Agag alive. This is one of Agag's descendants, and now this person is out to get the Jews. If Saul had done what he was supposed to do, this wouldn't be happening. But somewhere along the line, he didn't, and this is what the end result is. Sometimes this is a free lesson. Sometimes we don't see the results of our sin, but others might. Okay, and what Don is reminding us, for those that are watching online or will watch later online, Sarah did something similar. She tried to take matters into her own hand and gave Abram her handmaid, and through her, Ishmael was born, and Ishmael becomes the ancestor of the Palestinian people that would be the problem for Israel for years and years and years and decades and centuries and millennia. So if she'd have done it the God's way, that would have been different. But that's kind of the picture that's being drawn here, is these people doing things their own way, not listening to God. Why did Haman want to destroy the Jews? What's his emotional or mental or situation that's leading him to want to destroy the Jews? I'm looking for a word, but you can describe it and we'll come to the word. That's the word I was looking for. Prideful. He was prideful. All right, so hold that word in your mind for a minute. Why is pride such a deadly sin? Right? It takes the focus off of God and puts it on you. So you lose focus on God, you focus on yourself. Pride becomes part of that, what we call the original sin, that first sin that we read about, that Adam and Eve are tempted by pride to eat of that fruit. And so that sets in this whole motion of life. What does Paul say? This is a related question in my mind. What does Paul say is the root of all kinds of evil? The love of money. Not money, but the love of money. All right? The love of money, in my mind, is an issue of pride, of selfishness. Pride is the root of all evil because it puts us putting ourselves in the place of God. It's us focusing ourselves in the instead of God. Now, I know in our skit, Haman and mentioned the Jews to everybody and how he was going to kill the Jews. But when Haman actually goes to Xerxes, Ahasuerus, in the text, he never calls them by name. Why do you think that is? Okay, maybe he wants to disguise his hatred for them. Okay, maybe because he knew Mordecai was a Jew and he knew that Ahasuerus at least somewhat recognized Mordecai as being a leader and a good person, so he didn't want to call out who it was and what it was. One author made this suggestion, and when I saw it, it kind of rang true to me. Not naming the group of people and not naming the person dehumanizes them. And when you dehumanize a group of people, it's easier to do something to hurt them, to harm them, to kill them. Any World War II history buffs? Isn't that what the Nazis did to the Jews? They dehumanized them. You go back and look at some of the artwork that was put up, the posters. They made the Jews all look like villains and demons and dogs and all those things to dehumanize them. And if you dehumanize them, you can get rid of them. Isn't that what the Jim Crow laws did in the South? In some ways, isn't that what a lot of people do to Southerners and now to Christians? You put them in a class, you don't make them people. And so that's what Haman is doing here in some sense. All right, so let's go into the story for a moment before we go into chapter 4. Do you enjoy this story, this chapter 3? Yes or no? When Haman decides he's going to kill the Jews. Okay, this is one of those stories you are allowed not to like in the Bible.
There's a lot of political intrigue here, too. The subtlety with which Haman deals with the king and how vague he is, and then how trusting the king is of Haman. I mean, you think, as the king, wouldn't you check that out? You trust this guy so much that you're willing to take his word on this with no evidence. I mean, because Haman provided no evidence. He just said, this is what's going on. And the king said, take care of it. So,
Yeah, there's a lot of political maneuvering and a lot of things behind the scenes maybe that we don't see, but somehow Haman has Xerxes in his back pocket. And money talks, right? I'm going to make a 10,000 talents of silver deposited into your bank account, into the king's treasury, if you'll let me do this. Politicians don't work that way now. But this is as old as government. And this is what is going on here. So I don't necessarily like that part of the story. I don't like this chapter. I know it sets up the rest of the story, but I don't like this chapter. Anybody think, man, anybody want to defend it and say, man, this is a great chapter? I really like it? I'll let you say that and be wrong, but. Okay, it shows us how bad things are.
It gives great insight into human nature.
And it gives good insight into human nature, so there's value in it, but that doesn't mean I have to like the story. Mm-hmm. So, how do the events of this chapter remind us of life today? We've talked about the politics. How else does it remind us of life today? Okay? People in power, whatever, whether it's political or other ways, sometimes misrepresent the truth in order to get what they want. Well, there's another word for that. It's called lying. All right? And so they do that for their reasoning. People are still people.
Prideful people today don't need God. They're not Christians.
All right? Prideful people today don't feel like they need God.
Just like it was then.
Well, yeah. Just
People are people are people are people.
I think that's in the first Muppet movie, or maybe the Muppets Take Manhattan, it's the Muppets Take Manhattan, the second one, where the storekeeper, the restaurant keeper, the cook, people's is people's, all right? And that's just the way it is. The fact that I know that scares me. Okay, don't know what that says about my mental age, but we'll just leave it there. All right, you're in this chapter. You're Haman. The law has been said to bow down. No, you're Haman. You're Mordecai. The law has been said to bow down to Haman. You know that God's law says you don't bow down to anybody but God. What do you do? Same thing he did. How many say that would be easy to do?
Well, you know he wasn't the only Jew around.
No, he wasn't the only Jew around.
So Haman was all over the town because he was proud that he was who he was, and he wanted all that homage and adulation. So there were some Jews who did bow down, apparently.
It seems that there must have been some Jews that did bow down, and there may have been more that didn't, but we know about one. And he seems to be the one that sits at the king's gate, which means he was someone of an importance in the Jewish community. And so Haman sees him as a leader of the Jews, and he's the one that's going to lead a rebellion in his mind. And if Mordecai doesn't bow, the rest of the Jews won't follow. So if Mordecai bows, and the rest will follow. So there's a whole bunch that could be going on in his mind. But would it be easy? You know, can you think of any other Bible characters that didn't bow down when they were told to bow down? Daniel and his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That was their Babylonian names. Anybody remember their Hebrew names? Azariah, Mishael, and I can't remember the third one. All right. We know them by their other names. We know Esther by her name. We forget her other name is Hadassah. But again, that's a side story. But these four young men wouldn't bow. They refused to bow. Or specifically Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the story refused to bow to the statue of the king. And what ends up, we know the story, how that ends up for them. Yeah, so sometimes there may be situations where you know in your mind what you're doing and you have to work it out. Naaman is an example there of after his healing, let me go back with you. When I'm with the king, I have to do this, but please pray that God knows why I'm doing it. That I'm not really worshiping, I'm just doing it because that's what I'm supposed to do. Now, I don't know how you feel about all of that, but just think, it would be easy, wouldn't it? To give in. And I think sometimes, I'll get to Scott in just a minute. I think sometimes, I had a conversation today with a group of preachers from across the county, and some of them were from different groups around here, like the Church of Tuscaloosa, Grace Church, and a couple of guys from there. And so we were together for just coffee, and the conversation came up about Christian nationalism. How many in the evangelical churches are so focused on making America whatever that there is there's a push for Christian nationalism which supplants the church and is worshiping God, worshiping America over God. And so, I think we as Christians need to be careful that we realize that this world is not our home, that our citizenship is in heaven. Yes, we are citizens of the United States of America, and we need to vote. We need to vote our conscience. We need to vote righteously and morally. But the president's not going to save us. Egypt's not going to save us. The chariots, the horses aren't going to save us. Our Savior is Christ and God. So that's where our loyalty is, and that we need to be careful.
I've heard you say this before, and it's so true. The United States of America is not the new Israel.
That's right.
But some people think it is.
And that is a danger, isn't it? Scott, you were going to say something earlier?
This might have been a question for last week. Well, why did the Jews not leave when they had the chance?
They'd been in captivity for 70 plus years. Then they were allowed to go home. Some of them stayed. You're thinking, why did they stay? All right? That's a fair question. That goes back to last week. And I'm going to give you the thus guesses Scott McCown answer. My dad moved from southern Ohio, right across from Huntington, West Virginia. He joined the Navy at 17. He did his 2.5 years of active duty, and then he was out for 2.5 years. But after his active duty, his last station was in Key West, Florida. And so he was in Key West, and he came up to Pensacola, and he never left. Why not? He made a home. He met a girl who wouldn't leave, but he made a home. All right? Some of you are natives to Tuscaloosa and Northport. Others aren't. You move, you come, you find a home, you stay. Some of you are saying, well, I was raised here. I can go back. My great-grandfather, Oscar Anderson, that's the name we know him by. We're not sure that's really his name, came over from Sweden on a ship, and he jumped ship in New Orleans, was captured in New Orleans, put back on the ship, and he jumped ship in Pensacola, was captured and put back on the ship, and he jumped ship again in New Orleans, and they never found him. And then he, was engaged to my great-grandmother's sister, and then when the family said, no, we're rich, you're poor, you can't marry her, he had left her and married my grandmother, who was still the same family, but somehow it worked out. They ran off. All right, but he's from Sweden. Why didn't he go home? All right, he could have gone home, but he stayed. He made a family. All right, he raised his children, my grandmother and her sisters and brothers, in Pensacola. Why didn't my mom and dad go back to Sweden? Because it wasn't home. After 70 years, was Israel home? Was Judah home? Not to some people, because Esther was born in captivity.
Scott, there's another reason, which may be more to the point. They were going into war, the warring tribes. So if you're not ready for combat, you don't go get yourself killed.
Right, and when you're going back there, there's going to be altercations when you're trying to take that land back. So some stayed because they're not that group.
Yeah, Jeremiah told them to build houses and plant gardens and settle down. They'd be there 70 years.
And they did.
And they were assimilated, and they are in a place with stability now, so the majority did not go back home.
So, I think that kind of answers the question. That they find themselves here in this situation. All right, I'm going to go on. Let me see what time it is. Yeah, I'm going to go on to chapter 4. I think we've kind of talked around chapter 3. Chapter 4 is a better chapter in my mind. Mordecai learns everything that has happened. So he puts on the sackcloth, goes into mourning. Esther finds out. She sends word to him, hey, let's dress up and let's come and you talk to me about it. He sends word, no, I can't because I'm in mourning. Here's what's going on. He tells her about the decree from Haman that she needs to do something. And she has a dilemma. What is her dilemma? All right, she's the queen. All right, because, yeah, she could be killed because she's a Jew, But even as a queen, how is she limited in her approach to the king? All right, unless the king calls you, you don't go in. And if you do, you run the risk of him saying, not. So she has a dilemma. I either die trying to stop this, or I die as a Jew. And then there's that famous verse, that famous statement from Mordecai, which I almost butchered when I was doing it. You know, if you don't go to the king, relief, deliverance will come for our people from somewhere else. But don't think that you're going to escape death. Because if you don't go, you and your father's house are going to die. Who knows? You may have been brought into the kingdom for just this time. Esther, this may be why you're here. I find it interesting. Mordecai does not say, this is why you're here. He says, who knows? It kind of reminds me of Paul in Philippians, in Philemon, when he talks about the slave, the runaway slave, Onesimus. And he writes back to Philemon and he says, Onesimus came here and he obeyed the gospel, and I'm sending him back to you, not just as a slave, but also as a brother. So he's worth more to you. Who knows? He might have come to see me for this reason. Perhaps this is why he came. So Mordecai and Paul aren't saying God did it. They're saying maybe God did. Just food for thought there. All right. So then we know that she goes and she says, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to fast, and you're going to fast, and we're going to pray, and you're going to pray, and my people are going to pray, and they're going to fast. And then in 3 days, so many days, I'm going to go before the king. If he lets me in, great. If I die, I die. I've got to do something. All right. It's maybe this is why I'm here. All right. That's where the story stops. What do you think about this story? This chapter? Thumbs up? Thumbs sideways? Thumbs down? Like it? Don't like it? We got a bunch of likes. Okay, we like this one. Like this one because the heroine steps up. What's that? Finally. She needs some convincing, but she does step up. All right. Are there any things in this story that are similar, that you see that are similar to life today? All right. Sometimes, like Esther, I can be reluctant to step up and do the right thing because I don't want to be involved. Anybody remember the very last episode of Seinfeld? It's the Good Samaritan Law episode, when they all end up in jail because they saw somebody getting mugged and did nothing about it. How they made that funny, I don't know, but you know, that's kind of where sometimes we fall, don't we? Well, I don't want to get involved. If I get involved, it's going to cost me. It's going to hurt me. I might die. Isn't that what Esther said? But yet she's eventually willing to do it. But yeah, sometimes it's hard. It's hard to step into a situation. It's hard sometimes to do the right thing. I'm going to quote another. Go ahead. Sure. Yeah, so what he's asked her to do is not something easy, and he knows it. But he also knows she's probably the only one at this point that can do something about it. I'm going to piggyback off of what Randy said, and I'm going to summarize it with a positive statement here. or directive statement here. We need the faith of Mordecai here. We need to realize that no matter where we are, we need the faith of Paul here. We need to realize that where we are is where we are. And as I am who I am, where I am a child of God. And my influence in the world is my being a child of God in that moment at that time. So I'm going to go a step farther and not say, perhaps I'm in this place for such a time as this. As a child of God, I'm to be light and I'm to be salt everywhere I'm supposed to be. So I am in this place for such a time as this. I don't have to wait for God to speak to me and tell me to do something. He already has. There's a song on Christian Contemporary Radio from a couple of years ago that says, I looked all around me and I saw all these problems. I'm paraphrasing. And so I looked to God and I said, why don't you do something? And God said, I did. I created you. And the first time I heard that song, I went, ouch. Because maybe that's exactly what God's up in heaven saying when we say, God, why aren't you doing something about all the problems in this world? And he goes, I did. There you are. Take care of the problem where you are. The situation that you can help with. So there are a lot of messages here that we're jumping into the morals of the story here. Yes, there was. The song from many years ago says, brighten the corner where you are. And so that's who we need to be. George Bush I had a policy, a challenge for Americans to be a point of light. In fact, Randy Travis wrote a song based on that called Point of Light, challenging us to be a point of light where we are. And those are good statements and good ideas, and we as Christians, we should be, yeah, that's who we are. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. I think I just sang that one a little while ago. That's not just for children, is it? That's for all of us.
But also, Esther realized that she needed support, and she called on support. When she decided that she needed to be that light, she pulled in support, and she said, you get all the Jews together, and I'm going to get her handmaids may or may not have been, but she still pulled them in and said, hey, y'all gotta help me do this.
Okay, let me rephrase what she said. Esther did not do this alone. She said, I'm going to have my handmaids fast and pray with me. And I want you, Mordecai, to get all the Jews to fast and pray. Sometimes we feel like we have to do things alone. And we don't like asking people to help. Well, we need to give other people opportunities to do things, so ask for help. Sometimes people don't know what to do until they're asked. And then I have found that sometimes all you have to do is ask. And people are willing to pitch in and help. One of the college students has learned this lesson early in life because he texted me this week and said, what are you doing between 8 and 12 on Friday? And I said, I don't know. What do you have in mind? He said, it's freshman move-in day. We need somebody to help us. He asked, and guess what I'm doing? I'm going to pick up the lightest boxes possible and watch the young guys carry the heavy furniture. But we're going to help. I'll be standing back saying, pivot, and getting people to move stuff. All right. Any other thoughts or any other lessons you picked up from these two chapters? What's that? Don't give up. Mordecai was persistent, wasn't he? He did not give up with Esther. He asked Esther, he kind of pushed her a little bit. Here's who you need to be. All I know is what Mordecai said. you and your father's house will not escape. So somehow it would have been made known, at least in Mordecai's mind. One person can make a difference. You know, whether that one person is Mordecai getting the queen to do something or whether it's Esther doing something.
Kind of the same thing what he said, but it's like just because somebody's above you, because like Esther being queen and Mordecai being who he was, Esther was obviously above him socially. So it's like just because someone socially is above you doesn't mean they won't be scared or they don't have their own problems.
Yeah, sometimes we think of people who are higher up as not having the problems and not having the fears and the challenges that we do, but they have their own set of challenges. Esther had her own set of challenges. And here's another thing. Esther, even though she was queen, she was still respectful of Mordecai who had raised her. She did question a little bit, but she was still, I just used the word, just lost it, subject to him and did listen to him. Took his counsel. Thank you. All right. Don mentioned the power of one. Anybody remember the Patrick Henry quote? Give me liberty or give me death. Anybody remember Nathan Hale's quote? I regret that I have but one life to give for my country. What about a little boy, a little shepherd boy named David? What did he say when everybody else was scared of Goliath? In so many words, I will fight this giant. All right. Mordecai stood up as one for God. Esther stood up and took a risk as one for God. As individuals, they made a difference for God and his people. Sometimes we, as Christians, think we need the church to do something. And sometimes we need to be the church. And we need to do it. We need to be that one individual to do something, to take some initiative. All right, we've got 3 minutes. And one of the lessons within the whole book of Esther, specifically in chapter 4, is the idea of God's providence. God providing for his people. There are no, as far as I can tell, miraculous events in the book of Esther. But God is working behind the scenes through his people. I just purchased a little book. I have not read it because I've got 3 in front of it. Written by Cecil May, who was at Magnolia Bible College and then the head of the Bible department at Faulkner, on the idea of providence. It's about that thick, and the whole book is about providence. I'm looking forward to reading it, but I don't know what it says yet. Ladies' Bible class is doing that good. I'll be reading it with y'all then, just not in there with y'all. All right. I'm glad. Y'all let me know what you think. But I think it's going to be a good book. He's a solid Bible student. So I think what he's going to say is going to help me understand providence more. And I think Esther is one of those stories of providence, of God working behind the scenes.
Interesting, though, that God's name is not mentioned once in the whole book.
But yet God's name is not mentioned. But yet he is throughout the whole book. And there are a couple of reasons. There's one reason I think maybe is key for that, is traditionally, by this time specifically during the time of Esther, the Jews did not speak God's name aloud. All right, they had some weird traditions about that. And I'll just call them that. But they meant that as an idea of reverence. To speak his name is to make him less than he is. So maybe one of the reasons God's name is not in Esther is because there's a lot of respect for God in Esther. I think that's a strong possibility. All right, I think we're out of time. Thank you for your comments. And next week we'll pick up with chapter 5 and go through probably chapter 7 or 8, whatever the story leads itself to, maybe even 9. And did you ever get a horse for me to ride around on? Working on, okay. Oh, that's right. You don't know what's going to